Good afternoon. My name is Klaus Kuster. Despite his name, I'm Brazilian. I'm working under the supervisory of Dr. Mike Lesher and Dr. Michel Lay from the GSC. And now I'm going to present a different commodity in this afternoon. It's about the co-association of chromium and nickel copper PGE deposits in the Superior Province. So I'd like to thank the support from the industry that have been providing in-kind contributions and also logistic support, and from government funding and logistical support that I've been receiving, apart from metal worth. So, like in the world, like we have like lots of ultramafic intrusions that host many different kinds of commodities. There are some that host only chromium and PGEs, some that host nickel copper PGEs only, and there are a few ones that host both chromium, nickel copper PGEs in the same system, and those that host chromium and more PGEs associated to that, as a classic example in the bush belt. Many of these deposits are located within the same system, magmatic system, but the reasons why they're economic or not are not quite clear yet. For example, in red here we have some deposits in the Superior Province where we have large economic chromium deposits, the Black Tor, Blackbird in the Ring of Fire, and nickel in the nickel copper PGE in the Eagle's Nest deposit. Some places, just like the Abitibi Belt, we only have nickel copper PGE economic deposits as the Laxo or Dumont. And the list goes on for some different places like the Bush Belt, where we have lots of chromites in the UG2 and PGEs in the Miransky Reef, and the list goes on and on. In the Superior Province, we have this a different endowment in the distribution of this kind of commodities. As an example, down here in the Abitibi, we have a lot of, like marked by this red star, a lot of nickel copper PGE deposits. Meanwhile, on the northern portion here of the Superior Province is on an area that we are naming as Buji, which includes the Burge River, Uchi, Oxford Stool, La Grande, and Estiman, sub-provinces that goes all the way here. We have several occurrences and deposits prospects of nickel copper PGEs together with chromite deposits, as well as chromite deposits. And classic occurrences is the Ring of Fire, but we have Burge River is an important one, but we have also Menahiki and Lac des Montagnes in Quebec. So this brings us to my research problem, which to understand why some of these mafic ultramafic system hosts just nickel copper PGEs, just chromium, or both of them, and why some others are barren. And also, what's the spatial and the geochemical distribution of these ultramafic magmas that assesses all these different terrains, and why there's differential endowments in between these provinces. So the story so far is that for the genesis of these deposits, there's many different mechanisms that acted in the literature to create this metal endowment. I classify here according to what is on the literature on what's more important than the other of these mechanisms to generate this. For example, for nickel copper PGEs, having external sulfur, source of sulfur to induce sulfide saturation, in the literature is considered one of the most important mechanisms. And meanwhile, for example, external oxide sources to create chromium deposits is something that we have been debated, and we're working on a model and hope to add a few more stars here in the future. Also, the parental magmas for the magmatic deposits can vary a lot, especially for the nickel copper sulfides. We see here that they can range from high magnesium cumarites up to basalt, so we have a wide range. So parental magmas are not a very good constraint for the nickel copper PGE endowment. But for chromium, we kind of more restricted to the low magnesium cumarite to basalts. But even that it's not a huge, it's not a big constraint for the creation of these deposits. And apart from that, in the genesis of the chromite deposit, we have a problem concerning the mass balance. So so chromite is formed from it is naturally in low contents in chromatic magmas. So they crystallize very small amounts on quadratic proportion with olivine that is up to 60 to 100. So very small amounts. But we have a lot of deposits around, the Bushveld Stillwater classic ones, that we have several metric chromatites and up to 100 meters thick in the ring of fire as the black tor and blackbird deposits. So yes, that's a huge problem that we're investigating in. But today, I'm talking about the areas I've been working in the Superior Province to address this problem. So in this project, we're focusing on the Shibandon deposit, which is the only one occurrence of a significant chromite deposit in the Abitibi-Wawa sub-province, and also some others on the Bilgi, especially the Ring of Fire and the prospects here in Quebec, between the Eastman and Opinaca. So far, what we have found is that these three deposits that I'm investigating, they are marked by a couple coincidences. One of them is the multi-phase intrusives. So we have in darker purple tones here several more magnesium peridotites ranging from adcumulates to orthocumulates, that they are later intruded, invaded, and disrupted by a later intrusion in this lighter purple color in this selected drill graphic logs here. That will brecciate and disrupt several of the previous formed peridotite layers. To illustrate that, we can see here the earlier magnesium phases. They are pretty much consisting of ranging from differentiated more magnesium rocks, ranging from dunites and up to some olivine pyroxenites. And the area of the Lac des Montagnes, there are not many dunites, but there's still the first magmatic pulse range into some highly metamorphosed orthocumulate peridotite. And the less magnesium phases that invades and interfingers with the earlier phase generates, is more composed of, here in the Lac des Montagnes, of a gray, some grayish peridotite in the pyroxenite, and we're more clear that in the Ring of Fire that's more of a websterite, some pyroxenites too in the Shibandon deposit. And this will invade and dissolve or many of the previous semi-crystallized layers and generate a lot of clasts or magmatic breccias. For example, here in the Ring of Fire, we have several chromatite layers that were disrupted, and dunites in the Shibandon deposit, as well as here in the Ring of Fire. The later intrusion disrupted the previous olivine sulfide accumulates here, the neck texture sulfide, and yeah, that's not good because it dissolves the sulfide here, mobilize it, and create and lower the grade of the sulfide in the deposit. Same here for Lac de Montagne, where the hybrid, where the late intrusion created this antoliths, which are xenoliths that stay in the later rock that were part of the same system. Other coincidence of these deposits is that the chromite, the relationship with chromite and the nickel copper sulfides, they have a stratigraphic relationship. Our observations noted that the sulfide layers are always below the massive chromatite layers. As an example here on double eagle intrusion, the ring of fire, we have a very thick massive chromatite here that is sitting above the a considerable like high-grade nickel copper sulfide here. Same here in the Lac de Montagne intrusion. And it only doesn't happen when the later intrusion invaded and disrupted the previous layers, as we have here on this area, where the later magmatic pulse transported and disrupted chromatites and also sulfides. So maybe this is mobilized sulfides. And the Shibander here, I couldn't see any drill hole that we had both intersections in the same drill hole, but I could see they occurring in different drill holes, and the spatial relationship is still the same. So just for visualization here, like see that we can have from hundreds of meters apart, but we can have the occurrences at 5 meters apart, as in this drill hole here. So this is nothing different. This is also observed somewhere else out of the Superior province. Two good examples is the Stillwater complex and the Uitikons complex in South Africa. They are kind of both different kinds of intrusions. So Stillwater complex is a much more layered intrusion. Uitikons is more a dynamic conduit, as a magmatic conduit as the ones that I'm working. But they have the same relationship between the mineralization, where we have like basal nickel copper PGEs, chromium above it. Same working here, the same as the Uitikons, but Stillwater is more differentiated and intrusion that we generated rift style PGEs, as in the Bushveld, for example. So the summary of this first part is that the 3 deposits that I'm working, they present a near similar igneous stratigraphy and the spatial association between the mineralization. All the 3 intrusions, we have transgressive later intrusions that range from peridotites to pyroxenites, so less magnesium than the earlier intrusions that contains this kind of this breccias full of classes and antoliths. All the 3 mineralizations on all the 3 deposits, chromites, it's always above sulfide mineralization, as in Uitikons and Stillwater. I'm looking at Bushveld now because it looks like there's some kind of reversal there being discussed, but it's a future topic. And investigating that the relationship, what's the causes of this relationship. It can be coincidental, but it can have some genetic links that I'm investigating that might have to do with differential oxygen fugacities and something to do with the different moments to reach the chromite saturation. Looking a bit on the chemistry of these deposits. There are also many coincidental features on the geochemistry. As an example here, when you're looking at chromium against magnesium, for example, if we stipulate some commodity parental magma that will differentiate it, normally we would expect it to differentiate and form olivine cumulates, and then the other, and the last magnesium will differentiate it and then reach chromite saturation until it starts crystallizing chromite, reaches chromite crystallizes, and then reach LPX, and then we start to fractionation even more the magma. But what's happening here is that in all these three areas, the cumulates are all olivine chromite cumulates instead of olivine only cumulates, with some exceptions. So this tends us to bring us to think that these are initially chromium saturated magmas that evolve, instead of evolving to olivine cumulates, they evolved to olivine chromite cumulates. But we also see some samples, especially here and a bit more here in Shiband, that evolved from chromium undersaturated, chromium saturated. So somewhere here, especially looking at this trend, chromite reached saturation after the olivine only saturation. So we're investigating a model here to to evaluate that. One other example here is in the Ring of Fire, we have a lot of all those xantholiths and chromite classes, so it might generate some chunk of samples plotting here, but they also go into. So the thing here is that we have to investigate why the samples that are here. For example, we have this olivine chromite forming kind of a trend here. This is probably the cotectic line of olivine and chromium, but how do we push them to form chromite cumulates? I still don't have the samples here. They are being analyzed, but probably have some other chromite cumulates forming the same trend from here for both deposits down here. Another feature is for the iron content of these intrusions. The same story. We have in the background here some B2B samples for comparison. I forgot to mention that before on the other slide, where we see the nickel, and now like the B2B is we have lots of nickel copper PGEs occurrences, but we don't have much chromite in it. And the interesting thing is that normally nickel copper PGE sulfides in the B2B are related to high magnesium chromatites that will probably form around here and differentiate it towards an olivine accumulate and down in magnesium content. But in the Shiband one and Blue Jay and all the other areas in the Ring of Fire, we are generating more iron-rich cumulates, which we tend to think that they were formed from a less magnesium parental magma, like a low magnesium chromatite, because they are plotting closer to a lower phosphoric content around 85 here, comparing to the B2B, where we have phosphorite content going up to 95. That is the lower end here of the plot. So another recipe for the endowment in like many ore deposits is the degree of crustal contamination. And here looking at this lithophile trace elements diagram of peers that we saw a couple times today. We see that most of the accumulates from chromatic origin in all those areas here. This is a regional compilation data. They're all plotting in a mixing line towards the Archean crust, evolving from a normal depleted mantle. Despite some alteration that might be having here, those cumulates in the Buji and Wawa are going much more toward Archean crust, much more contaminated than those in the BTB, which could be some kind of proxy for the endowments in chromium in this area and not in the BTB. But crustal contamination alone cannot tell it, because as I said before, it has to be specific contamination. So in the case for nickel copper PGE sulfides, we want contamination in sulfur-rich rocks, and we are investigating the possibility of oxide-rich rocks to upgrade and create chromite deposits. So the summary for that is that the cumulative rocks on the study areas, they are apparently derived from lower magnesium and chromite saturated magmas. So it is consistent with chromite mineralization, and at the same time we have the opposite in the B2B, where we have probably higher magnesium magmas and chromium undersaturated magmas, which relates for the lack of chromite deposits in that area. As I said, so the lithophile trace element ratio, they plot on a mixing line between depleted mantle and crust, giving some degree of crustal contamination, but it alone will not determine if some terrain is more fertile or not. So for that, I am looking at and compiling potential contaminants for these intrusions and in all of these terrains in superior provinces, looking especially at where we have sulfide fasces and oxide fasces iron formation, and together with that, with a compilation of where chromatic magmas were assessing this rocks in the superior province, we will build a database with some classifying where are the most and the least prospective areas, let's say like this, in the superior province. So I'd like to acknowledge a few people that helped me from the summer to now, and thank you. If you have any questions.